Hey gang, what's up? Aaron here, Canadian Looney. It's Wednesday night. Been a busy week already in the House of Commons. A few committees went on today. Got a few of our favorites here to watch. We've got Michael Barrett, Michael Cooper, Rachel Thomas, and in the third committee that we'll be checking out, God Saad is one of the witnesses testifying, and he's a very, very interesting guy. Like, I've been following him. I've read a couple of his books. He's a brilliant mind. And he's probably, I didn't get to watch the committee. We're going to do that here. Pretty sure he's going to put the Liberals in their place. Let's get into this. Let's kick it off. In Canadian federal politics, the Canucks are represented by two separate yet unequal groups. The globalists who sold out and the opposition trying to salvage a country. These are their stories.
We're going to go to our rounds of questions now, and we're going to start with Mr. Barrett for 6 minutes.
Yeah, gang, smash the like, hit subscribe, come and join us for the day shows. We do night shows very often as well. We do a day show for the question period, and we do a pre-show for 45 minutes before we get into question period, just the things that have happened the evening after the question period or the morning before. Anyhow, let's get going. We're going to kick it off with Mike Pierre.
Followed by Madame Lapointe. Je pense que tu vas partager ton...
I think that you'll be sharing your time with Mr. Seri. And then Mr. Thériault.
Professor Green, thanks very much for taking a moment to personalize your appearance today. I appreciate the connection to your father's military service and to the Thousand Islands region, where I have the honor to represent, and of course have a kinship with your father through the opportunity that I've had to serve as well. I'd also just like to quickly observe the photo over your left shoulder. That's lovely, and while we've read about your background, I think that photo probably says more than I read in your biography about you. So I appreciate that very much, sir. I'd like to get through. I have 5 minutes remaining for questions, and so I'd like to get through 4 if I could. And on blind trusts, you mentioned that if I could characterize it as a perception of inefficiency in having a designated public office holder sell their assets instead of placing them in a blind trust. The commissioner, during his appearance, which you're familiar with, said that the trustees generally don't sell what's placed into the trust. And so the public office holder knows exactly what went in. So is there an issue with not just the characterization of it being a blind trust, but also with the reality of them knowing, and their advisors knowing, and their cabinet colleagues and other officials knowing exactly what went in?
Well, that's a very important question. And I have talked with former public office holders who, having very high ethical standards, have told their trustee, you can sell anything in my trust. I just don't want to know whether my assets are still in there or if they've changed. And then after he became free of being a public office holder, he was quite shocked at what had been sold and what he thought were the very poor decisions of the trustee about the replacements. So it's a chance that public office holders take. It's something that having these required divestments, and the blind trust being one possibility, in politics is only about 30 to 40 years old. We're experimenting. And this is why I think it might be good to have a major study of various different systems in Canada and other countries, and what works best, what needs to be changed. It's a complex issue. But I think if, once again, I think the focus is mostly on the screens that have been set up for Mark Carney, and will they work? Will they create problems? Only time will tell for that.
Okay, Mr. Barrett. Sorry, Mr. Green. Mr. Barrett has a question.
Okay.
So, in the case of you raised the Prime Minister and his screen. So during the most recent campaign, the Prime Minister said, and it was reported on, that he had crafted the Liberal Party platform. Now, at that time, he was just exiting his private sector career, and of course was very aware of all of the investing that he had done and what was inside the investments that he had created for Brookfield Asset Management, those particular funds. And at that time, the screens weren't in place yet, and so the timing of his Mr. Carney's election as leader of his party, his appointment as Prime Minister, and then the subsequent election campaign, that all took place before these measures had been taken. But the policy document that underpins now the political document that underpins the government's policy documents was written by him without any any space between. So does the system protect public confidence of our institutions in a case like that?
Well, we are never going to get a system that is perfect. We have to experiment, and we really have to depend on the integrity of public office holders to make difficult decisions like this. My experience with looking at political scandals federally and provincially is that the people that we have to worry about are those whose finances are close to the line, and they might be tempted to do something unethical to make sure that they have a nest egg when they retire. If someone is very, very well off, they're much less likely to be tempted to benefit themselves because they're already pretty well off. But as I say, you raise legitimate questions, and it's something worth looking into more thoroughly.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Green. Thank you, Mr. Barrett. Oh, yeah. You have 5 minutes. Go ahead, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Professor Green, I'd like to ask you some questions about ethics screens that can be set up by the Ethics Commissioner pursuant to Section 29 of the Act in respect of public office holders. At the end of your opening statement, you spoke of the importance of public confidence in the robustness of our ethics laws. And in that regard, there has been some criticism of ethics screens from the standpoint of transparency, insofar as they effectively enable a public office holder to get around reporting requirements under Section 21 sub 1 of the Conflict of Interest Act, which requires a public office holder to publicly report each occasion that they recuse themselves to avoid a conflict of interest. I'd be interested in your thoughts.
In my past life, when I worked for the Alberta government, my wife was an auditor who sometimes was asked to audit some of the agencies that I was responsible for. So ethics screens had to be set up for both of us. So I understand being covered by an ethics screen. And you have to ask a lot of hard questions about the specific situation. It's hard to generalize about them. But I think in the end, it's up to the integrity of the people involved to make sure that you're trying to make decisions that are as impartial as possible, that are in the public good. And you have to be able to defend your actions as being ethical and in the public good. And as I say, there isn't a perfect cast in stone solution. It depends on each individual situation.
I think what you have said, or what I understand you to have said, is that we are, with respect to the Prime Minister's ethics screen, for example, to simply trust the Prime Minister, the Clerk of the Privy Council, and the Prime Minister's Chief of Staff, both of whom serve at the pleasure of the Prime Minister. Can you understand that many Canadians, from the standpoint of having confidence that the ethics screen is working, might find that wanting?
I think that many Canadians don't understand the difference between a potential conflict of interest and a real conflict of interest. All of you, and I'm sure you yourself, have found yourself in a potential conflict of interest. There's no corruption involved in that. It's simply part of life. You have to take appropriate measures to make sure potential conflicts don't become real conflicts or apparent conflicts. And if you don't take those steps, or other people don't advise you to take those steps, then there's trouble. So I think many Canadians see potential conflicts of interest and on the horizon for Prime Minister Carney, because of who he is and his background.
If I may, sir, what's lacking is transparency. We're simply left to trust. So, again, I think that is problematic. And again, I mean, how is that better than simply requiring that the Prime Minister publicly disclose, publicly report each and every time a conflict of interest or potential conflict of interest arises with respect to Brookfield or any of the companies that are part of that very vast ethics screen, 89 companies.
Yeah, that's it's a very complex question, because that sort of information might create problems on its own. There may be people, dishonest people, who want to try to impress the Prime Minister by investing in their assets. There may be foreign governments who may be trying to influence Canada by investing in the confirmed Prime Minister's assets. And so there are all kinds of problems that could result from being overzealous. I think the system that we have right now, based on our 40 years of experience with these kinds of things, works as well as it can. It's not perfect. There will need to be changes made in the future. But as I say, these are such complex questions. Maybe it's time for a Royal Commission to look into them more thoroughly.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Green. Thank you, Mr. Cooper. Ms. Church, for 5 minutes, please. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I don't know if I'm going to be able to handle this church for more than 5 minutes or up to 5 minutes. We've got way more. Rachel Thomas is up next, so I'd rather watch her. That's no
Dr.
joke.
Green, thank you for being with us today, and thank you for acknowledging, I think, the shared fond memories we have of being at two great institutions in Canada, the University of Alberta and the University of Toronto, also my alma maters. I want to ask you a little bit about, because I think it's significant that Parliament enumerated within the objectives of the Conflict of Interest Act that the very purpose of the Act included an objective of encouraging experienced and competent persons to seek and accept public office and to facilitate interchange between the private and public sector. Can you just talk a little bit about why you think those objectives might be an important piece to the framework that we're discussing today?
Well, yes, we want people to get involved in public life who have a broad range of experience in many different sectors of society, and to create rules that are unnecessarily strict so as to discourage good people from getting involved in politics, I think, is counterproductive. It's important to have rules that are strong enough that where most Canadians think that the people getting involved in politics have high ethical standards. I mentioned the Royal Commission on Party Financing and Electoral Reform.
I don't know about that.
Back in which reported in 1991. One of the exercises that we undertook was to have a couple of days of meetings with representatives of all the parties. I think we chose 5 women and 5 men from every party that existed in 1991 to talk about ethics and how to promote ethics. And one thing that I remember from those 2 days of meetings was that the equal number of men and women, many women said they are reluctant to get involved in politics because the ethical standards are so low. There need to be stricter standards and more women would get involved in politics. The men tended to be of a different point of view. Oh, if they're too strict, you'll keep too many good people out. So it's a question of finding a balance. And as I say, I'm interested in studying ethics in politics because I want Canadians to have a high opinion of people that get involved in politics.
So if it's important to have a framework then, and a strong framework, a trusted framework, and the blind trust was created in that vein, what are, in your view, some of the indices of what would make for a strong trust, like the terms of the trust, the requirements that are built into when you establish a trust? What do you think gives this system its strength?
I think having a trustee or trustees who have integrity, who could be trusted to manage the affairs competently and ethically is important. I think it's important to have people helping with the screens, like the clerk of the Privy Council, to make sure that the screens are working properly. That's a big job. I hope the clerk of the Privy Council has some assistance with regard to that. Anyway, this we will see how the current system works. But I think it's really important for you on this committee to try to make sure that there are high standards, that Canadians have trust in the situation. I know that, getting back to the Royal Commission, some of the male participants in that 2-day conference we had said, we don't want higher ethical standards because our opponents will use them to criticize us. That would be unethical. So it's, I think it's important to make sure that ethical standards are used to make sure that the system is as ethical as possible, not to jump on your opponents.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Green.
Oh, yeah. All right, gang. Just a quick mention. My name's Aaron, Canadian Looney. We cover Canadian federal politics in a day and a half. It's going to be 2 years since I started doing this. And when I came in, didn't have a clue, didn't have a side, was just trying to figure out why and I'm a single guy who I live a very basic life, why I was less money all the time. I worked for the government for 18 years, so my standard of living should have been at least staying level, but it wasn't. Anyhow, started following politics, and now I have a side. I know what's going on. Anyhow, I'm trying to show Canadians, like I did when I started, what is going on in the country. Trying to get 50,000 subscribers by Christmas. I'm working on that. I'm working really hard. And I'd appreciate you subbing in. Come and check out our chat room. It's a pretty friendly gang. Everyone in our chat room, most people are critical thinkers, good people that know what's up. Anyhow, not to shock you, but It's going to be like a smack in the face what's coming up next. Let's keep this going.
As priority objective, our government has quickly taken action in several areas of activity, including culture. The digital age is profoundly transforming our society, and in the cultural, media, and information sectors in particular, technology is evolving at an incredible pace. At the Mondial Conference, which will be held in Barcelona in a few days, we'll have the opportunity to discuss how emerging technologies are transforming and can support the cultural sector. Indeed, this evolution brings challenges, but also immense opportunities, both domestically and internationally. In Canada, we've chosen a balanced approach that fosters innovation while protecting the rights of artists and rights holders. We underscored this last June in the G7 Leaders' Declaration on Artificial Intelligence for Prosperity. Par ailleurs, la mise en œuvre de nos lois historiques, que sont la loi...
The implementation of historic legislation, Online News Act and the Online Streaming Act, continues, as does our commitment to fight disinformation and to strengthen local news.
Unbiased and timely life-saving information is essential. That's why we are committed to supporting strong, independent newsroom across the country, with the strengthening of CBC Radio-Canada as a key priority. Now more than ever, we must remain firm in supporting our own creators and promoting Canadian content. We promised Canadians a strong public broadcaster and better access to local news, and that is what we're focusing on. Nous poursuivons aussi activement la mise en œuvre de la loi visant les...
We continue the implementation of the Act for Substantive Equality of Canada's official languages and moving forward quickly and in developing its statutes. This is historic legislation. It's very important to contribute to protect and promote the wealth of our language heritage. Our two official languages are not just a cultural source of wealth. They are also a major economic opportunity, opening doors to international trade and facilitating relations between our provinces and territories. As we defend French and our culture, we invest in the prosperity of our communities. I would also like to say that it's important to have the One Canada Pass, Strengthen Canada Pass. It's a summer initiative of our new government, which made concrete a key commitment of our campaign, helping families choose Canada this summer and discover or rediscover the natural and cultural wealth that are the strength of our country, while supporting local economies across our territory. Its popularity and our emblematic locations' popularity have shown the unity and the pride that exist in this country. Parks Canada, one of the main guardians of our natural treasures, is the example of this pride.
Identity, uniting Canadians through powerful stories and iconic landscapes, fostering a deep sense of pride. They connect us not only to Canada's history and environment, but also to one another, reinforcing the values and experiences that define us as Canadians. With decades of experience working with partners, Parks Canada supports Indigenous self-determination, cultural continuity, and socio-economic well-being. Indigenous-led programs expose millions of visitors to the culture, wisdom, and practices of diverse Indigenous communities. With more than 200 sites, I'm almost done, Madam Chair. With more than 200 sites across every province and territory, in urban, rural, and northern communities, Parks Canada plays a vital role in supporting local prosperity. These treasured places are powerful economic engines that drive tourism, create jobs, and strengthen communities' well-being. With 24 million visitors helping generate $4 billion in GDP annually and spending the equivalent of more than $11 million every day in communities across the country. Nous avons le plus beau pays du monde, et nous avons raison
We
d'en
have the most beautiful country in the world, and we have every reason to be proud of it. Our riches are assets to protect and to enhance, to build our country and to build the world in which we wish to live. Thank you for your attention. I'm ready to take your questions.
First, to Mrs. Thomas for 6 minutes.
Thank you. Minister Travis Danraj was employed by the CBC as a news broadcaster, and this summer he launched a human rights complaint against the CBC, alleging that they had created what he calls a toxic work environment. He says that he faced discrimination, bullying, and harassment as a person of color. In an email that he sent out announcing his new podcast, he stated, and I'll quote, "To be honest, this has been the hardest period of my life. What happened at CBC really broke me," end quote. Minister, according to the Government of Canada's own website, the CBC is a Crown corporation that operates at an arm's length from government, but it is ultimately accountable to Parliament through the responsible minister, which in this case would be you. Have you reached out to the CEO of the CBC regarding this situation and the toxic work environment that is being accused there?
Merci pour la question. Donc, comme vous l'avez...
Thank you for the question. As you said, first of all, I deplore what happened to this employee of CBC. As a government, we expect that all government-related organizations create a healthy work environment for everyone. The government role is not to get mixed into the daily operations and management of the organization. That is in the purview of the organization, in this case, the public broadcaster, who also has a board of directors. Our role is to ensure that the public broadcaster plays its role and represents the values and Canadian culture.
To get into the nitty-gritty day-to-day, but this is not the first employee that's come forward with concerns. There's been numerous of concerns brought forward with regards to the toxic culture that exists at the CBC. Ultimately, you are responsible for having appointed the CEO, and she does answer to you as the minister. You have the ability to move her out should that be needed. Have you had a conversation with the CEO with regards to the toxic culture that exists there?
Comme vous le savez probablement, la nouvelle...
As you may know, the new CEO has been on the job since, 6 months? So since last December. I have had the pleasure of meeting her once since I have come to this job, and I imagine since she's on the job. And as I've repeated, our expectations as a government are, whether it be CBC Radio-Canada or any other Crown Corporation or department, everything must be done.
I'm going to take that as a no. And I think that's incredibly shameful that as a minister you wouldn't take enough interest in the well-being.
You asked me if I met her, and I said I did.
Pick up the phone and just have a conversation with the CEO and figure out what the heck's going on there. I share my time with my colleague, Carrie Dion.
Mr. Minister, I heard you say that you believe in the principles of diversity and inclusion, correct?
Oui, c'est exact.
Okay.
Yes, that's correct.
One of the core stated responsibilities of your Heritage Ministry department is diversity and inclusion. And yet, Travis Donraj said he was used as a token of diversity. And in his own blunt words, and I will repeat his blunt words, the CBC didn't get the brown guy that they thought they were going to get, end quote. He said he discovered this when he tried to be inclusive of conservative news views on his show, Conservative Views. So what steps have you personally taken to address these systemic issues?
Je pense qu'il faut faire très attention en tant que parlementaire.
I think you have to be careful about not taking one event or several isolated events and then generalizing from there. If you look at what's being done at the public broadcaster on radio, on TV, in recent years, there have been considerable efforts made for diversity and inclusion. Is it perfect? No. I don't think anybody is perfect in this area. I think there have been significant improvements, and this is certainly going to be part of the conversations which I will be having with the new CEO of CBC to know how we can continue to improve, how can the public broadcaster continue to improve in this matter.
Quote, workplace defined by retaliation, exclusion, and psychological harm. So that workplace, the CBC received nearly $1.4 billion in taxpayers' funds from your department last year. So as the minister responsible for the CBC, are you concerned that your department is funding a workplace that has been described in this way?
Encore une fois, je suis vraiment désolé pour l'expérience de travail que cette personne a.
Again, I am truly sorry about the work experience this individual had, but I refuse to generalize to the entire public broadcaster about these. I know several people that work there and people who are there as a result of diversity who have personally told me several times how the work climate there is very positive. It's possible that for that individual that things did not go well at all, and I'm very sorry about that. As I said, I think it's always possible to do better, and we'll be working with the public broadcaster so that we can do better.
Canadian Heritage has planned to spend $281 million on diversity and inclusion in the coming year. So will any of this money go towards ensuring there is a diversity and equity in the opinions broadcast on CBC?
Je pense que faut faire très attention. Au Canada, on a un diffuseur.
I think you have to be very careful. In Canada, we have a public broadcaster, but it's not a government broadcaster. Our government doesn't tell the CBC what to say and what not to say. That's done in authoritarian countries. But in a democracy, whether it's here or in France or in Germany, ABC in Australia, the government does not intervene in programming and in broadcasting. We ensure that the public broadcaster is properly managed and is managing public funding, and we are responsible to Parliament. It's absolutely out of the question to have the government become involved in the daily activities.
6 minutes.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Minister. Ethnic media outlets play a crucial role in ensuring that Canada's diverse communities see themselves reflected in our media landscape. In Port Moody, Coquitlam, we've heard from groups like the Canadian Ethnic Media Producers Association and local outlets such as Parvaz Media and KTV Media about the need for sustainable funding. What steps is the government taking to support ethnic media organizations so that they can continue serving their communities and contribute to Canada's cultural fabric?
Merci beaucoup pour la question. I think there's a number of things that the government is doing to try and foster this particular Canadian ethnic media producers across the country. So we have the Changing Narratives Fund, what we call the CNF, which is a $10 million investment over 3 years to support diverse voices in Canadian media, support diverse communities, Indigenous, Black, racialized, ethno-religious minorities, people with disabilities. We also have the Canadian Media Fund that supports diverse communities in television, digital media, screen industry, and cinematic production industries. In fact, the CNF is a stream of the CMF, so the Changing Narratives Fund is under the Canadian Media Fund. Prioritize projects that foster development of an inclusion audiovisual sector. We also have the Local Journalism Initiative that supports diverse communities in written press, community radio, community television, and online news services. It's delivered by a non-for-profit organization to protect the independence of the press, so the government doesn't decide who gets money through that. And there's a priority to hiring diverse journalistic representation. And finally, the last example I would give is the collective initiatives component of the Canada Periodical Fund that supports diverse communities in the magazine and newspaper industries.
Merci. Thank you very much. In 2012, in my riding of Port Moody, Coquitlam, Amanda Todd, a young 13-year-old teenager, tragically lost her life after relentless cyberbullying and non-consensual distribution of her private images. Her story is a powerful reminder of the devastating consequences of online exploitation. Today, with the rise of AI-generated deepfakes, women and marginalized groups are being disproportionately targeted. What can our government do to ensure stronger protections and supports for those most vulnerable to these evolving forms of online sexual exploitation?
As a father of 3 girls, my heart goes out to Amanda's family, and what happened to her should never happen to anyone. Online safety is certainly about protecting kids, but it's obviously more than that. So we're committing to making a criminal offense to distribute non-consensual sexual deepfakes and increase penalties for the non-consensual distribution of intimate images by strengthening the criminal code. I believe, as we're speaking, in fact, my colleague, Minister Fraser, is in the House of Commons, speaking on his new bill C9. And in terms of platforms, we've made a commitment to combat online harms. I have myself worked on that during my first passage at Heritage between 2019 and 2021. Many of my colleagues have continued on that. We tabled a bill in last Parliament, C63, that was aimed not specifically at online harms, but also modernizing the criminal code. So we will be introducing measures to address hate speech, terrorist content, and the harmful distribution of intimate images.
Yes, thank you. I'll be sharing my time with MP Al-Sud. Merci.
And thank you, Madam Chair. Minister, I'd like to touch on heritage, Heritage's economic dimension. Mississauga Centre sees it firsthand. Heritage and culture are not just about identity; they're about jobs, investment, growth. I think of the Mississauga Arts Council, for instance, that plays a key role in providing opportunities for emerging artists. Could you speak to us about the role that heritage and cultural investments play in creating good jobs and strengthening our economy?
Yes, I mean, for obvious reasons, when we think about the heritage sector, arts and culture sector, we tend to think, for very valid reasons, of its intrinsic cultural and artistic values. But we sometimes tend to forget how important of an economic driver it is in Canada. To give you a few numbers, in 2024, creative industries in Canada provided approximately 670,000 jobs in the country that contributed to $65 billion to Canada's gross domestic product, which is, I think, as a sector, it's one of the highest sector in terms of its contribution to GDP. So it's obviously heritage and cultural investment. It's obviously about preserving our past, but it's also a powerful economic driver, but also a powerful unity and identity and community well-being driver. In communities like yours, where diversity and creativity thrive, these investments help create good, sustainable jobs across a wide range of sectors. Canada is actually globally recognized for its high-quality creative content and industries, which are an engine of economic growth advantage. And it used to be that, it was Montreal and Toronto, but now we're seeing creative hubs being developed all across the country, from coast to coast to coast, really, where foreign investment are coming to Canada to create jobs in the creative sector. And that's a good thing for all of us.
Thank you. Over to you for 5 minutes.
An organization called Cult MTL. It's a self-proclaimed politically left tabloid that exists online, and the Heritage Department deems it as, quote, journalism. They've given them a grant to that effect. It was given in 2024-2025. On September 11th, the day after Charlie Kirk's assassination, this organization released an article titled "To Hell with Charlie Kirk." And the article makes light of his assassination and then ends with these words, "You reap what you sow." Now, I'm an advocate for free speech, so as much as I find these words disgusting, I'll defend their right to say them. However, what I do find indefensible is the fact that Canadian tax dollars were used in order to propagate this type of material. Do you believe that that's wrong as well?
Honestly, I checked with the Deputy Minister. We have not been made aware of this. I can undertake to quickly look into this with the department and see what, in fact, was printed in this newspaper, and we'll come back to you and convey this to all of the members of the committee.
The article here with me, so I could give it to you here today. Would you cut the funding to this organization, or would you continue to support this type of thought that is being put out there?
Subject, of course, to any verifications that the department and I myself may do. Hate and spreading hate has no place in the public discourse in Canada, and we have legislation to that effect. As I said previously, we are not aware of what was written in this case, but we will make the necessary verifications.
Example of such actions that have been taken, and it's actually Canada's Special Representative on Combating Islamophobia co-founded an organization called the Anti-Hate Network. Now, they've been funded by your department to the tune of almost $1 million. And a portion of this money was used to hire what they're calling, quote, an investigative journalist. And what they're asking this person to do is find stories about what they're calling far-right groups and individuals. And a part of their definition of those that would fall within this group includes Catholics and people who identify as pro-life. Now, this investigative journalist would then go find stories or write stories and then give them to the mainstream media in order to get the narrative out there further. Now, as you can imagine, something like this only serves to divide people. It's a grave disservice to the unity of our country and the well-being of our people, and it spurs further polarization. Now, in the beginning, you stated, and I'll quote, that we need to unite and come together. So when an organization is taking almost $1 million from your government and using it to this end, do you believe that they should continue to be funded?
Comme je l'ai dit, effectivement, notre rôle...
As I've said, our role as a government and as members of parliament is to unite people and not work to divide them. With the department's team, I'll be looking at what was done by this organization. And if, in fact, what you're saying is true, we will take the necessary steps.
Invoke the tax dollars that are going into an organization like this? I mean, Minister, let's be clear. You're collecting tax dollars from people all across the country with all sorts of beliefs, from all sorts of backgrounds. And those dollars are being used towards an organization that's actually furthering or spurring greater polarization and arguably hate in this country by choosing to pick on certain groups of people. Minister, is that type of behavior excusable? Should we continue to use public dollars for that type of conduct?
C'est arrivé dans le passé que nous ayons retiré du financement des organisations.
In the past, we have withdrawn funding from organizations which did not act in keeping with the federal government's values. We will examine this particular case, and if it turns out that the organization does not deserve to continue receiving government funding, the funding will be withdrawn.
To hearing from you, I hope on the record, as to your decisions with regards to both these organizations, CULT, MTL, as well as the Anti-Hate Network. Minister, you did say that you had a welcome meeting with the CEO of the CBC. I'm just curious, to be clear, you did not at all bring up with her the workplace culture at the CBC and the fact that there are significant complaints and numerous complaints with regards to it being toxic in nature. That did not come up in your meeting with the CEO.
I'm sorry, there's no time for that response. You're out of time. Mrs.
Well,
Thomas,
that's convenient,
perhaps you can...
because you gave everyone else an additional 20 to 30 seconds.
You had an extra 20 to 30 seconds in the first round, and now we're into the second round, and I'm trying to be more cognizant of everybody's time. So we'll go to next over to Mr. Waugh for 5 minutes.
Mr. Minister, welcome back. You were here in 2019, 2021, when I was here. There's a few of us left on this committee. Thank you to the staff, Ms. Mondu, and the three Andrews that are here today. Mr. Minister, I just want to raise again this workplace culture with CBC that Ms. Thomas, I just want to get it on the record, if you don't mind. When you did meet with the new CEO of CBC, Marie-Philippe Boucher, you did not raise the workplace culture or the toxic atmosphere at CBC, or did you? Yes or no?
Madame Bouchard et moi avons parlé de plusieurs choses.
Madame Bouchard and I spoke about several things, including the importance for the public broadcaster of being aligned with Canadian values, of course, as well as the values being defended by the Canadian government.
Talk at all about the workplace culture that has all of a sudden percolated, if you don't mind me using that word, with the CBC recently?
Je pense que là-dessus, on va devoir s'entendre sur le fait qu'on ne s'entend pas. Moi, je ne partage pas votre opinion.
We have to agree to disagree. I don't agree that you can take a few isolated cases and generalize to the entire public broadcaster when it comes to the whole issue of the atmosphere at work and working conditions for thousands of employees at CBC. We can't take a few isolated examples and say that this is the way it is for everybody. I don't share your point of view. But where I do agree with you...
Oh, I mean, it was on every...
Médiatisé, mais ça ne
Yes, it's got a lot of media coverage. But that doesn't mean that the situation is generalized across the public broadcaster. That's where I don't agree with you and your colleague. I don't share that point of view.
You share this, Minister, with the CBC. As you all know, the viewership is down, the revenue is down, and in fact, the trust is down. And the former CEO, when we had Ms. Tate here, actually agreed with the trust in CBC is down. The streaming platform subscriptions, we don't know where they are, but now your leader has promised another $150 million to CBC. How is this possible? I'll tell you what it is done in Western Canada. Okay, CKSA Lloydminster has served that community for 60 years. Stingray shut the station down because CBC's there now. And the same with CHAT Medicine Hat. 70 years in that community, television is gone. 70 years in Medicine Hat, gone. So while you say the public broadcaster is this and that, I want you to know the public broadcaster has crept in and has destroyed private media in this country. I gave you two examples here, 60 and 70 years. Your thoughts on that? How is this reasonable?
Nous en avons parlé tout à l'heure avec votre collègue.
We discussed this earlier with your colleague, Mr. Champoux. In Canada, and when I'm talking about traditional media, in Canada, as elsewhere, everywhere else in the world, or almost, is experiencing difficulties with the advent of the online platforms, with advertising budgets that have gone from local television and newspapers to the web giants. I think looking at a global problem and saying that it's Radio-Canada or CBC's fault, well, I just don't agree with that. And I see that people across the country are saying, we want CBC here in our community. I've heard that across the country.
They hide the numbers of GEM. You know, there was an ATIP on CBC this summer asking just, how many subscriptions do you have to GEM? Oh, we can't tell you that because it wouldn't be fair to our competitors. Crave, which is owned by Bell Media, actually has 3.8 million subscribers in this country. And yet, for CBC GEM, we can't share it. There's free subscriptions, and then there's the paid, $5.99 a month, I think. So is that fair when you say, you know, the public broadcaster is hiding when they're asked? We'd like to know how much money is put into GEM. How many viewers? It might be, Minister, that GEM is useless and it should have been torched a long time ago. So when they're covering up, as a former broadcaster, when I see them, oh, we can't tell you, then I know there's red flags with the corporation. I know that for sure. And in Ontario, I'll just tell you, 0.35% of the streaming market in Ontario participated in CBC GEM. That's not even 1% of the province of Ontario. So that tells me little or no participation in this country on GEM, whether it's free or subscription-wise.
Thank you, Mr. Waugh. That's your time. And
we are joined by Dr. Nadia Hassan, Assistant Professor, School.
Okay, like the chair of this committee is ridiculous. Like, obviously, she didn't used to wear whatever she's wearing. Like, there's many pictures. She just dons that for the woke folk over there, those crazy lefties. Anyhow, there's so many very interesting witnesses in this one. We're going to get into it. God saw it. I'd recommend reading any of his books. He's brilliant. There's another Canadian that works over in the UK that testifies in this one as well. He's amazing.
School of Gender, Sexuality and Women's Study, York University, and she's joining us by video conference. Professor Eric Kaufman from University of Buckingham by video conference. Special thanks to you for joining from all the way from there. We are joined by Gath Saad, visiting scholar, Declaration of Independence Center for the Study of American Freedom, University of Mississippi, by video conference. Thank you. And our fourth witness for today is Society for Academic Freedom and Scholarship, being represented by their president, Mr. Robert Thomas. All the witnesses will have 5 minutes for the opening remarks, and we will start with Mr. Saad, because he requested to start first. So please go ahead. Floor is yours. You will have 5 minutes for your opening remarks.
Okay, here we go. Many thanks for the invitation to participate in this important discussion. Meritocracy is the sole operative ethos when judging research excellence. Scientific quests have a singular goal: to better understand the world and its wondrous mysteries. Science is not an empathy party meant to elevate and celebrates so-called marginalized groups. The use of diversity, inclusion, and equity when allocating research funds is an affront to individual dignity and to research excellence. A 2025 report by the Aristotle Foundation found that 97.5% of academic job postings at Canadian universities reference diversity, inclusion, and equity. I will discuss briefly 3 such examples from my chapter in The War on Science. First example, the University of Waterloo's School of Computer Science recently advertised for 2 open NSERC Tier 1 Canada research chairs, and I quote their call. Position 1 in all areas of artificial intelligence. The call is open only to qualified individuals who self-identify as women, transgender, gender fluid, non-binary, or two-spirit. Second position in all areas of computer science. The call is open only to qualified individuals who self-identify as a member of a racialized minority. Close quote. Second example from the University of British Columbia for a Tier 1 Canada research chair in oral cancer research. Quote, the selection will be restricted to members of the following federally designated groups: people with disabilities, Indigenous people, racialized people, women, and people from minoritized gender identity groups. Close quote. Third example, from my own university, Concordia University, researchers there obtained a New Frontiers in Research grant to decolonize light. On their website, they explain, quote, the Decolonizing Light project explores ways and approaches to decolonize science, such as revitalizing and restoring indigenous knowledge and capacity building, close quote. The Decolonize Light project is congruent with the 5-year strategic plan of Concordia University to decolonize and indigenize the entire curriculum and pedagogy. Apparently, science has suffered for too long from a whiteness problem. Canadian medicine has also succumbed to this parasitized ideological capture, as I discuss in my forthcoming book, Suicidal Empathy. The anti-racism expert working groups of CanMeds, which develops evolving training codes for physicians and surgeons in Canada, concluded that, quote, a new model of CanMeds would seek to center values such as anti-oppression, anti-racism, and social justice rather than medical expertise, close quote. If you suffer from an aggressive cancer, it might be comforting to know that your oncologist is trained to, quote, combat the historical and ongoing structures of racism, white supremacy, settler colonialism, heteropatriarchy, capitalism, ableism, classism, sexism, homophobia, transphobia, and more, close quote. I end by quoting from my book, The Parasitic Mind. Quote, science is or should be an apolitical process. Scientific truths and natural laws exist independent of researchers' identities. The distribution of prime numbers does not change as a function of whether the mathematician is a white heterosexual Christian man or a transgendered Muslim obese individual. The periodic table of elements is not dependent on whether a chemist is a Latinx queer or a cis-normative Hasidic Jew. Oh, you are a non-binary bisexual chemist? Well, this completely changes the atomic numbers of carbon, palladium, and uranium, close quote. Ideological activism is anathema to research excellence. Meritocracy is all that matters. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Saad. Now we will proceed to Dr. Nadia Hassan. Dr. Hassan, you will have 5 minutes for your opening remarks. You can please go ahead.
Thank you for inviting me to speak today. As mentioned, my name is Dr. Nadia Hassan, and I'm an assistant professor at the School of Gender, Sexuality, and Women's Studies. I'm also the director of the Islamophobia Research Hub at York University in Toronto. I have nearly 20 years of experience working at the intersection of academic and community-based research through both nonprofit organizations and post-secondary institutions. Today, I want to talk about 2 things. First, the importance of funding research that deepens our understanding of and helps us combat racism, hate, and discrimination in all its forms. And second, how federal funding can strengthen meaningful partnerships with communities. We're having this conversation in a troubling global context. In the United States, the targeting of diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives has brought with it a dismantling of academic freedom itself. This has led to restrictions so sweeping that terms such as climate, woman, peanut allergies, safe drinking water have made their way onto banned words lists in federal agencies, according to outlets like the New York Times, the Washington Post, and PEN America, who also report that this has already resulted in failed or rescinded research grants. This type of political censorship undermines democracy, limits innovation, and stifles critical scholarship. It is a cautionary tale for Canada and a reminder that our federal agencies, and this committee in particular, must resist these chilling trends. Let me begin with my first point: why Canada must continue to fund research that addresses racism and discrimination. The evidence is strong that diversity in research ecosystems results in more innovation and better research impact. So, for example, research on Black maternal health, an area that has been long ignored in the research community, uncovered systemic inequities that led to new initiatives reducing infant and maternal mortality. Indigenous-led scholarship has revealed the devastating impacts of colonial violence, language loss, cultural erasure, implications for health and safety, while pushing institutions towards truth-telling and action. These examples, however incomplete, show how rigorous research does more than describe problems. It has saved lives, changed systems, and built paths to justice. This work is not easy, and at times it requires courage, though it should not have to. Consider the recent stabbing of a gender studies professor and students during a lecture at the University of Waterloo. The attacker admitted to deliberately targeting the class and in his manifesto expressed support for the gunman who live-streamed the killing of 51 people at mosques in Christchurch, New Zealand. He also referenced the massacre of 69 young people in Norway carried out in the name of xenophobic and Islamophobic ideologies. In this climate, professors in gender studies all over Canada and related fields increasingly fear for their safety. Many, including me, are now advised to avoid publicly posting our office or classroom locations and implement safety plans and trainings. This is not a healthy environment for fostering intellectual curiosity, open debate, or the free exchange of ideas. In my own work at the Islamophobia Research Hub, I strive to create methodologies that empower impacted communities. So, for instance, we're working with policymakers, labor organizers, service providers, and Muslim communities to study systemic barriers to the economic integration of Muslims in Canada. We're also examining the impacts of Islamophobic violence, such as the fatal attack on the Afzal family in London, Ontario, and the Quebec City mosque shooting, on the mental health and identity of young Muslims. These projects center community-based knowledge where lived experiences become a foundation for evidence-based change. However, this kind of research is not easy to sustain under current Tri-Council funding structures. This leads me to my second point. Federal funding must be structured in ways that make community academic partnerships more accessible, efficient, and sustainable. Community partnerships are heavily encouraged, but the support mechanisms are often inadequate. As someone who has been both a community partner and now a university researcher, I have seen both sides of this struggle. So, for example, with community partners, I co-wrote a 53-page SSHRC application for a $23,000 Connections grant that was meant to focus on the experiences of Muslim women accessing shelters. We did not receive the grant, but what stayed with me was the enormous uncompensated labor I had to request from partners already overstretched in underfunded women's shelters. While SSHRC now allows salary research allowances for community partners, streamlining the application and modernizing its outdated portal are crucial to fostering meaningful partnerships. The bottom line is this: Canada should fund good research. It should enable partnerships and reduce barriers, and it should do so without bias or political interference. At a time when academic freedom is under threat elsewhere, we have an opportunity and a responsibility to strengthen it here. Thank you.
Thank you. We will now proceed to Mr. Thomas. Mr. Thomas, you will have 5 minutes. Please go ahead.
Good afternoon, and thank you for having me speak today. My name is Robert Thomas, and I'm the president of the Society for Academic Freedom and Scholarship, a scholarly society founded in 1993 in Ontario to advocate for academic freedom and the merit principle in Canadian academia. I'm also an academic librarian at the University of Regina, where my work focuses primarily in the humanities and social sciences. Today, I would like to give arguments in support of two criteria that we believe are essential for a successful and principled national research environment. The first of these is a merit-based research funding and hiring decisions in Canadian research chairs and funded research. This is important. It is important to base decisions in a way that supports and encourages the most promising and meritorious research agendas. Canada needs, for instance, the best cancer, business and political science research. What Canada does not need is research where meritocratic excellence has been eclipsed by other government policy goals, whether or not these have laudatory aims. In particular, I refer to funding and hiring decisions where identity factors such as sex, gender, and race can displace the focus on the individual's work itself. SAF provides two arguments to this point. The demographics of faculty in any particular discipline does not generally reflect the population at large, and outside of sex ratios is not always accurately known. As an example, engineering researchers are more likely to be male than our nursing ones. Demanding both disciplines have the same sex ratios flies in the face of reality. The other argument we make is a moral one. A scholar should be valued for his or her individual contribution. We believe that there is something dehumanizing about being funded or hired, either fully or in part, because of identity group factors. I will share a story about a colleague of ours, Augie, who works in sociology on the East Coast, and wrote a piece in the SAF's newsletter a few years ago. So he was talking to an unnamed colleague, trying to convince him in the importance of merit as a principle of academic choice, academic merit. And the unnamed colleague talked to Augie and said, when we were hiring you for this job, one of the things that we really liked about you is that you were gay and that it would bring more diversity to the department. This did not impress Augie because as he said in the article, he was hoping that his colleagues appreciated him as a competent sociologist and not as a competent homosexual. A second point is academic freedom and how it's affected by EDI statements and research. So the final point I'd like to make around equity, diversity, and inclusion statements, in our view, forcing researchers to voice support for EDI principles in their funding applications is a form of political and ideological attestation that should be considered anathema in a free society and is an extraneous criteria for funding. Some researchers may no doubt write such statements in good conscience. Others will have to outright lie or at least hide their real opinions in order to get the funding that allows them to do the work that they have passion for. Those in the middle will feign enthusiasm for a commitment to EDI that does not exist. I believe that this is detrimental both because it infringes on the moral autonomy of researchers, but also because it creates a false idea of broad agreement and assent, which may not well exist. Turkish-American academic Timur Kuran has written much about preference falsification, where individuals falsify their beliefs due to social pressures to conform. Many other people in these groups will follow suit, falsifying their beliefs as they see the buy-in by their colleagues as proof of the widespread acceptance of the official perspective. As Curran's research shows, buy-in can face grave problems as people inevitably discover that many in their circles are not actually true believers, but indeed are themselves obfuscating their actual beliefs. Long-term buy-in to contentious beliefs like EDI requires that people have the moral autonomy to dissent without risking censure, career, suicide. Mandating EDI statements of any kind in our view is unhealthy as it impinges on moral autonomy, but also self-defeating for EDI's proponents as it helps bury the arguments that need to be had for long-term acceptance. For these reasons, we believe that making funding decisions and hiring decisions based on identity factors and the requirement of EDI statements should not have any part in research funding criteria in Canada. Thank you.
Thank you. We will now proceed to Professor Conmen. Professor Conmen, please go ahead. You will have 5 minutes for your opening remarks.
This is Dr. Eric Kaufman. He's from Vancouver. I think he grew up in British Columbia, but he's a professor over in the UK, and I've seen him on other podcasts in interviews. He's very sharp. I'm looking forward to listening to what he has to say.
Thank you. There's really 2 points I would make. First is that there's a trade-off between excellence and equity in Canadian research, and the second is that EDI is political and not morally neutral. So I want to raise several concerns over aspects of research funding in Canada under the rubric of EDI. Main point I wish to make is that EDI, as practiced by the research councils, reflects a political left-wing view.
Sorry for interrupting. There is some interpretation issue. Oh, yeah. Go ahead. I just want to explain to the members that there are some technical issues and the interpreters will not be able to do the translation for Mr. Kaufman. So the solution which I have proposed is that as Mr. Kaufman has emailed us his opening remarks, he will read the opening remarks, and those are with the interpreters, and they will read that in the French. And in regards to the questions by the members, the solution is that the members can ask the question to Mr. Kaufman, and if he can send the written reply, I think that's the solution we can work on. Yes, Mr. Noor Mohammed.
Madam Chair, just from a timing standpoint, can you give us a sense of how late we're going to go or what what the plan is?
Let me start, Mr. Kaufman. Sure. I will work on see what the resources are available, and some witnesses have to leave also. So based on that, I will let you know. So without delay, I will ask Mr. Kaufman to go ahead. You will have 5 minutes. Please go ahead.
Okay. I wish to raise concern over several aspects of research funding in Canada that fall under the rubric of EDI. The main point I wish to make is that EDI, as practiced by the research councils, reflects a left-wing worldview I term cultural socialism. Cultural socialism consists of 2 tenets. First, diversity and equity, which means rather than equalizing outcomes by class, as in, say, Marxist socialism, outcomes should instead be equalized by race and sex through discrimination against, say, white men. Second, inclusion, that minority groups must be protected from emotional harm, even if this requires censoring free speech and limiting the pursuit of truth. This aspect of EDI underpins what's known as cancel culture. EDI is political, not neutral. When I asked a representative sample of 1,500 Canadians in September 2023 whether they approve of flying the pride flag on government buildings, those who identified as left-wing approved 63 to 24, while those who identified as right-wing disapproved 74 to 15. Centrists also disapproved by a more modest 42 to 35. The point here is that EDI questions expose wide political divides. Therefore, DEI is political. EDI is a dominant ethos of Canadian research funding councils, evident in both diversity statements on application forms and naked race and sex discrimination in hiring and funding calls. I'll make 3 points here about EDI. The first, most Canadians do not support it. I found that 59% of Canadians favored a colorblind approach to, quote, combating racism by treating people as individuals and trying not to see race, unquote, as against just 29% for a color-conscious approach involving, quote, combating racism by being made aware of race in order to better notice inequalities, unquote. In the U.S., a majority of people, including Black and Hispanic respondents, support the Supreme Court decision banning racial preferences in university admissions. Second point is that DEI reduces research excellence. Richard Sander famously showed that admitting Black students to law schools with lower entrance scores correlated with those students achieving lower grades. More recently, data collected for a 2024 study in the journal Nature showed that female academics had significantly lower numbers of citations than men, even when controlling for field of study and years in the profession. Black and Hispanic scholars had substantially fewer citations than whites and Asians, though the gap was not as large as for gender. This may reflect a form of societal inequality, but artificially narrowing the talent pipeline at award stage does not rectify this problem. It merely prioritizes equity over excellence. Third is that DEI creates the conditions for delegitimizing research funding. Confidence in higher education in the United States has fallen from nearly 60% in 2015 to just 36% by 2024. Among Republican voters, from 56% in 2015 to 20% in 2024. In Canada, the trust remains higher, but it is at risk. For instance, I find just 49% of Conservatives trust social science and humanities professors compared to 69% of those supporting the Liberal, NDP, and Green parties. This is still higher. Conservative support of 49% is still higher than the 34% trust I find among U.S. Republican voters. But this shows that once a sector becomes left-coded, it loses the confidence of Conservative voters. Consider that only a quarter of Canadian Conservative voters now trust the media, and that's approaching U.S. levels. And support for established institutions such as the CBC is in sharp decline. Why isn't this recognized? Well, 75 to 90% of Canadian academics, according to surveys, are on the left, with a quarter identifying as far left. As William Desarowich writes, they're therefore insulated from public opinion. This is why EDI heavily shapes grant assessment and hiring, despite being opposed by most voters. As the U.S. pattern shows, this is not sustainable. Public reaction to scenes on campus, especially since October the 7th, which have been informed by cultural socialism's outrider of settler colonialism, will only make this more salient. I strongly advise Canadian research councils to abandon their current focus on cultural socialism, or EDI, if they wish to retain public support. Thank you.
Thank you. We will now start with a round of questioning. Before I go ahead, we have the resources available until 6:45, so we will have to end the meeting at 6:45. So I'll start with Mr. Baldinelli. Mr. Baldinelli, you will have 6 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to the witnesses for being with us this afternoon. Dr. Sad, I'll begin with you. In your book, The Parasitic Mind, How Infectious Ideas Are Killing Common Sense, you write this: for decades now, a set of idea pathogens, largely stemming from universities, has relentlessly assaulted science, reason, logic, freedom of thought, freedom of speech, individual liberty, and individual dignity. If we want our children and grandchildren to grow up in free societies as we have done, then we have to be assured in our principles and stand ready to defend them. Earlier, we had Dr. Snow discuss some of his concerns. He had mentioned about an activist agenda having been embedded in funding applications, primarily in the social sciences and the humanities. So essentially, you're telling those looking for research to accept the narrative to get the funding. Should science not be about discovery and not accepting the narrative that some government bureaucrat or some university bureaucrat puts forward? And do you agree that we need to change this, and how?
Thank you for that question. Yes, of course, I think that we should change it. Look, the pursuit of truth is a deontological mechanism, meaning you don't say, I believe in truth, but, right? There is no consequentialist ethic when it comes to the wonder of discovery, the wonder of science, right? For example, in soccer, there's only been 8 countries that have won the World Cup, even though there are 200 countries that compete. Should we say that we should create more equitable outcomes? In marathon running, Ethiopia and Kenya have won most of the Boston marathons for the past 35 years. Jews have won nearly 25% of Nobel Prizes, even though they make up 0.2% of the world's population. So there are certain human endeavors that are organized along a meritocratic ethos. Science is one such endeavor, and we should do away with all this diversity, inclusion, and equity stuff because it harms science. I come from a very rough background. If there's ever anybody who's had a victimology story, it's me. And yet I stand before you proud in that I've overcome my rough childhood. I don't need the help of someone to be a dignified individual. That's what makes me meritorious, and I only wish that Canada would re-adopt that stance.
Thank you so much. Dr. Kaufman, thank you for your comments. And you had also appeared at committee here on November 28th in 2024. You had also appeared at the same time as Christopher Dummett. And some of the concerns that both of you had raised were with regards to the lack of viewpoint diversity. And in your testimony then, you had talked about, I would like to see the councils get ahead of the problem and move to a colorblind merit approach. Can you expand on that and what you would like to see and what recommendations you would make?
Yeah, I mean, there are two issues here. I mean, one is the question of meritocracy, that is non-discrimination on the basis of race and sex, which we've heard a lot about. There's also a point called viewpoint diversity, which is, I mentioned that 75 to 90% of academics in Canada, according to Chris Dummett's survey and Zach Patterson, were on the left. And so you have almost very few conservative voices from academia. We're seeing in the United States the implications that has or may have for the health of the higher education sector. If you create a hostile environment for certain beliefs, such as conservatism, then you are going to essentially force those people not to go down the academic pathway, and therefore deprive particularly the social sciences and humanities, politicized disciplines that need viewpoint diversity in order to arrive at the correct answer. They're not going to get that viewpoint diversity, and so you're going to get all kinds of research that's going to go way off track.
Mr. Thomas, for the Society for Academic Freedom and Scholarship, on the website, it indicates many universities have policies that are discriminatory to the extent that they favor groups of students or faculty on the basis of race, sex, etc. Such preferential treatment is unfair, is damaging to academic excellence, and stigmatizes the very groups so favored. So how does our university systems, the tri-council agencies, how do we go about fixing that?
I think we have to focus on merit. We have to focus on excellence and do away with the privileging of identity factors. So increasingly within universities in Canada, there are advertisements, which you may have heard of from other witnesses, that if you want a particular position, you need to have a particular race. You have to be Black, you have to be Indigenous, you have to be a woman, instead of focusing on an individual's abilities to best meet the needs of that science. So focusing on excellence on their actual production as an individual, instead of focusing on something that by an accident of fate, they are a particular race, a particular background, that they bring nothing. People don't bring that to the table per se. That is just something they are, rather than what they focus on with their work, which should be that excellence should be the benefit we're looking for.
I think 2 seconds.
We will now proceed to MP Noor Mohammed. MP Noor Mohammed, please go ahead. You will have 6 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And maybe I'll start with you, Professor Saad, because I really did enjoy your book, The Sad Truth About Happiness. And sometimes in this profession, I think we live in some of those times. Listening to you today, I guess one of the questions that came to mind that I'd love if you could share with us is any empirical studies that you can cite that show that diversity initiatives actually harm the quality or objectivity of scientific research.
Thank you for your kind words. It's lovely to hear that people in the committee are reading my work, so thank you for that. I can certainly try to come. I don't have the citations in front of me, but there is no conceivable reason why diversity along my sexual orientation or my skin color or whether I'm two-spirit or non-binary is going to improve our capacity to map the human genome or better understand the distribution of prime numbers. Science liberates us from the shackles of our personal identities. It's an epistemological tool that democratizes our capacity to seek science. By definition, science should be free of all that stuff. But if you want references, I can certainly try to whip some up for you.
I would love some, because in looking at the empirical data that I have seen, it shows that diverse teams tend to produce more innovative and higher impact research. And that's evident. So that evidence means something. And so I'm trying to understand what the methodological problem there would actually be.
So you're right that there is some metrics of diversity that improve research quality. So for example, interdisciplinarity, where you're getting diverse expertise joining together to solve a problem, does lead to better outcomes. Some of the biggest and most important breakthroughs in science come at the intersections of disciplines. So interdisciplinary diversity does improve science. Whether on my team I have people that are exclusively homosexual or heterosexual or self-identify as Latinx or not, does not help me solve the distribution of prime numbers. It almost seems laughable that in the 21st century, I would have to make that point. So intellectual diversity does improve science. All of the other metrics of diversity don't.
Okay, so onto the basis of meritocracy, a lot of what you're saying is meritocracy should trump all. And as somebody who has spent most of my life making sure people didn't identify me or promote me or put me in positions because of my religion, my name, the color of my skin, etc., I'm a big believer in meritocracy. One of the challenges, though, that we've seen in Canada and in other parts of the world is that it's much harder to measure merit in systems where access to education, to funding and networks has historically been unequal. So how do we overcome that so that you are, in fact, getting exactly what you said, which is the widest diversity of viewpoints, such that you were able to do high-quality research?
Thank you. That's a great question. That's the tension between, which I'm sure you're familiar with, equality of outcomes and equality of opportunities. Any time that we find that there are lacking equality of opportunities, then we should intervene and try to solve these, right? 100 years ago, we didn't have women in medical schools. Today, we have more women than men. 100 years ago, most universities were populated by men. Now, at the bachelor's, master's, and doctoral level in the United States, women outnumber men across 5 racial categories. So wherever we see that there are truly systemic barriers to entry for any group, then we need to eradicate those. But that doesn't come from saying that only queer people who are non-binary get to be a professor of artificial intelligence at the University of Waterloo. I mean, imagine how insane that makes us look globally. Artificial intelligence is one of the hottest areas. One of the elite universities in Canada is going to choose its chaired professors based on whether they are Latinx or queer.
So let's just dig into this piece of it, because I want to make sure that what we're not saying is that, and maybe we are, I don't know, I mean, I'd love to hear from you and then Professor Coffin for, depending on how much time I have. Are we saying that by having diverse academics or people that are hired where those criteria also exist, that we are abandoning the merit principle? And if so, has research quality, research outcomes actually diminished because more diverse people have entered academia?
If the manner by which we've achieved diversity within those research groups stems from non-meritocratic ethos, then by definition, the quality of the research goes down. I wouldn't mind if every one of my postdocs were two-spirit, if they are the best people possible. If none of them are two-spirit, so be it.
But I guess my question more is, though, are you seeing that academic outcomes and research is diminished because those types of individuals who come from quote-unquote equity-seeking backgrounds are now producing research, or is the research quality the same or better?
I mean, I don't have the empirical evidence, but surely we can just argue it philosophically, right? I mean, how could it be that University of Waterloo is looking for chaired professors in artificial intelligence based on the gender orientation of the computer scientists?
No, my question is more, have you seen evidence, have you seen examples of where people have been hired to do high quality research that are less good because diversity criteria were applied?
I mean, I couldn't give personal anecdotes because I don't use those metrics. As a matter of fact,
sorry for interrupting. Time is up for Mr. Noor Mohammed. We will now proceed to Mr. Blanchet. Bianca, please go ahead. You will have 6 minutes.
Merci, Madame la Présidente. Je salue les témoins qui sont avec nous.
Thank you. Greetings to witnesses here for this important study. My first question goes to Dr. Saad. You talked about the ideology.
I'm in a bit of a bind. I sort of agreed with myself that I'm not showing any more Bloc Québécois. They pissed me off with their last 2 votes. They want the criminals on the streets. Doesn't matter how many times you've been convicted. 3 hours later, you're out on bail to commit another violent act or prey upon some child. And the gas cap. But he's going to be asking God-Sod questions, so I kind of want to hear the questions.
Parasitization of universities. When we talk about federal grants, is this not transforming funding organizations into political instruments? Is this not undermining the trust of the public?
I didn't have my translation thing on, but I speak fluent French, so no problem. Of course, it affects the trust that the public has in us, right? I mean, I've sat on committees, on SHIRK committees for graduate funding, where every single grant application in important fields in the social sciences is about queering this and indigenizing that. How could that make sense? I teach evolutionary psychology and psychology of decision making. What does it mean to indigenize and decolonize the study of psychology of decision making? It's absolutely laughable, right? Science liberates me from my sexual orientation. It liberates me from my skin color. It liberates me from my sexual orientation. That's what makes science beautiful. So of course the trust of the public and the taxpayer is damaged when we allow these parasitic ideas to infect our university ecosystems. It's grotesque. It's tragic.
Vous avez travaillé des 2 côtés de la frontière. On sait que plusieurs...
We know that many American states have started abolishing DI policies, but even before the re-election of Donald Trump, are we seeing any positive impact on research there? Would Canada not find itself in trouble if it insists on the policy?
Of all this diversity, inclusion, equity stuff in the United States, certainly the election of Donald Trump has accelerated that. I see no autocorrection taking place in Canada. If anything, I see the doubling down of all of the parasitic nonsense in Canada. Again, I can't cite you specific empirical studies that point one way or to the other, but again, science is a fully meritocratic thing. Nobody gives a damn about your identity markers. The best people should be doing the best science, period.
Aux États-Unis, on voit
In the US, we've seen a drop in DI policies, whereas we're doing the opposite here in Canada. Does this not risk isolating our research and affecting our young people at a time when meritocracy remains the standard? You who are here are good examples.
As a matter of fact, I've taken a leave from Concordia University, and I'm currently at the University of Mississippi at a center that is rooted in American freedom, precisely for that reason. I stopped applying for research grants and applying for a chaired professorship in 2018 because I wasn't willing to play the game of doing a diversity, inclusion, and equity statement. I can't be the guy who wrote the parasitic mind and then when nobody is looking, play along. And so I've not had any research funds for 7 years. I've now left to the United States precisely because of all these parasitic ideas. So if you could imagine that both myself and Professor Kaufman have left, you could imagine that many other people who should be staying in Canada will decide to go elsewhere where they can pursue their research free of identity markers.
Professeur Saad, une étude publiée par la Fondation Aristote cette année a montré que 98% des annonces d'emploi.
Professor Saad showed that some studies in Canada had DEI criteria in Canada, sometimes mandatory. If in employment we see that the DEI policy is becoming a condition of employment, by imposing the same conditions on funding, are we not displacing what scientific excellence is supposed to be?
I quoted this in my opening remarks. It's 97.5% of job applications, academic job applications, have DEI as a central feature of the application. Again, that is grotesque. I know for a fact that at one point I was applying for a renewal of my chaired professorship. I held a university-wide chair for 10 years at Concordia. When it came time to reapply, someone told me confidentially that, sorry, we couldn't give it to you even though you would be easily deserving of it because it had to go to a woman. How do you think that makes me feel? I worked 32 years as a professor. I lose because I don't ovulate. Does that strike you as fair?
Dans la même étude, on apprend qu'à l'université.
In the same study, we hear that the British Columbia University limits positions to a race or group identity or an ethnic group. Is this the opposite of meritocracy? Is there no danger here that we could find this logic in funding of research by Ottawa?
Research granting process or in the job application process, even the tenure decision has been fully parasitized by all of this nonsense. There was a professor at UBC that didn't get tenure because she hadn't published much. She then went ahead to the Human Rights Tribunal and argued that she is indigenous and she comes from an oral tradition. So, forcing her to write things as a publication went against her culture. Imagine that this is something that the Human Rights Tribunal actually listens. It's unbelievable. And the quicker we get... Now, look, I want to live in a bigot-free society. I come from Lebanon, where I faced a lot of bigotry. So I understand what bigotry is. But the way to solve bigotry is not to impose reverse bigotry.
Quand des critères comme l'équité...
When we see DI criteria becoming mandatory for employment and funding, are we not creating a closed circle instead of putting value on this?
It's a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? For example, professors, as Professor Kaufman said, don't usually hire anybody that has any political position that is contrary to theirs. That's why in some disciplines, and these studies have been done, and I can share you those references, in the activist social sciences, you are more likely to run into a unicorn than to run into a Republican or conservative sociologist. You're more likely to run into a horse that has wings than to run into a Republican psychologist. That's not a good thing. There are very good ideas on the left. There are very good ideas on the right. Our students would benefit from hearing the totality of ideas.
30 seconds.
Beaucoup de chercheurs disent...
Lots of researchers say that there are grants.
Sorry for that. Now we will proceed to Mr. Ho. Mr. Ho, you will have 5 minutes. Please go ahead.
Madam Chair. My question is for Professor Saad. It's an honor to have you here on this committee. You mentioned that DEI is an affront of individual dignity. So I was just wondering if you could elaborate on that a little bit more, and whether you agree that DEI is a form of government-sponsored top-down ideology.
I mean, absolutely. What greater manifestation of ideological top-down stuff than DEI, right? I mean, I present myself to the world as Gad Saad. Part of me being Gad Saad is I have green eyes. Part of me being Gad Saad is I come from Lebanon. Part of me being Gad Saad is I'm a certain height. I've got some merits. I've got some faults. So I am an individual, and I ask you to judge me as an individual first. The reason why I love science is because when I do my science, I'm trying to discover something interesting about the world. And that phenomenon that I'm studying exists independently of my identity. That's what makes science beautiful. It liberates us from our shackles. So that's what I mean when I say it's an affront to individual dignity. All of the members of this committee are worthy individuals because they are individuals. So I'm first Gad Saad, and then I'm a member of a group. So nothing could be worse than to create collective tribalism in the pursuit of science.
Well, thank you. And we've seen DEI essentially replace meritocracy and this liberal top-down ideology in federal research, and which is, by the way, funded by taxpayers. So it's essentially a government-sponsored ideology that's being implemented onto our public institutions. So, do you think that this has an effect of censoring academic freedoms and has the effect of being reverse discriminatory on groups that are considered not adhering to DEI?
It has a huge effect on censorship. The most dangerous censorship is self-censorship. So I receive thousands of emails that always say the exact same thing. Dear Professor Saad, there's a bunch of compliments, and at the end it's, if you decide to read this email on your show, please don't mention my name. And the person who writes it is a postdoc, is a doctoral student, is a professor, all of whom are happy that I have the courage to say what I say. They would love to say it, but they know that if they do, they will lose their position in the lab, they will lose their position for funding, and so on and so forth. This is not Yemen. This is not North Korea. This is not communist China. This is happening in Canada and the United States.
Wow.
This is grotesque.
Yeah, I mean, let's go back to basics. DEI is supposed to be something, purportedly supposed to create a fair, inclusive, and an environment that's supposed to address historical marginalizations, but it sounds like it's creating the opposite effect. It's unfair, it's exclusionary, and it's actually marginalizing those who have differing viewpoints, which again goes against the purpose of academic research, is the pursuit of knowledge creation. Would you agree that this is affecting Canadians' trust in public institutions? We've seen the lack of public trust by Canadians in public institutions at an all-time low, and it's no coincidence that it's after 10 years of liberal top-down ideology being implemented on public institutions. So, do you think it hurts our reputation globally?
Of course it does, right? I mean, one of the reasons why I've been able to build I'm thankful to have built such a large platform is because the message that I share with the wider audience is one that resonates with people, right? So when I exist in the rarefied ivory tower, then I'm viewed as a pariah, right? Because I don't say the things that I'm supposed to say. But the larger audience, the trucker, the corrections officer, the police officer, they're all writing to me and saying, oh my God, I wish my son or daughter had you as a professor. Look, being a professor is a privilege. It's a place where you can be a free thinker. The reality, though, it's an Orwellian, Kafkaesque world where everybody is afraid to utter one syllable out of place, lest they might be fired or somebody might find out that they don't love Justin Trudeau or that they love Donald Trump. This is not what we want in our academics. We want them to be free thinkers.
And this Liberal government is doubling down, it sounds like. It's actually making it even worse. So what has DI actually achieved? What do you think? Has it destroyed more than it's actually built?
I mean, 1,000%, right? I could show you tons of emails where someone wrote to me saying, I was thinking of going to academia, but I know that I am...
Sorry for interrupting. Time is up for Mr. Hu. We will now proceed
She's
to
an
MP Jessic
ignorant
for
broad.
5 minutes. Please go ahead.
Thank you so much, Chair. Dr. Hassan, I would like to bring you into this conversation. You've obviously heard the other panelists during this hour, and perhaps you heard some of the earlier testimony when we started today. There has overall been, I would say, through the course of the study, some agreement that in terms of study design, diversity in terms of EDI is actually useful in terms of the content of the research, and also to a certain extent that having diverse teams is also of value in terms of training new researchers and so on. A lot of the conversation seems to be today related very much to the Canada Research Chairs and various equity targets and so on. Do you have some thoughts on the current situation as it relates to Canada Research Chairs?
Yeah, thank you so much for the question. I guess I want to kind of start off by just reminding everyone that the reason why these programs have come about, regardless of how imperfect they are, is that they're trying to solve a problem. And that problem is pretty well documented. So I have a list of studies that I can cite I'm happy to submit them to you after the fact, but there's studies about gender biases in research funding awards. There's studies about biases against people who are racialized in research studies, and also the experiences of faculty from marginalized communities, postdoctoral fellows from marginalized communities that document how, there continues to be a problem of bias and prejudice in some of our funding programs in Canada. So these are coming about in the spirit of solving a problem. Now, I agree that there are, I'm absolutely against anything that tokenizes or would tokenize me, for example, as, a South Asian Muslim woman. But I'm also against things that are performative and that don't actually work. The reality is, and the research shows, the evidence very clearly shows that diversity in research produces better impact in research studies. It produces better innovation. It widens our epistemology. It widens the way we think. It widens the way people address problems. And it widens the way we include more and more people. We're trying to address an issue of exclusion here, and a pretty serious one that is very well documented. And I don't think that having Canada research chairs that are dedicated to certain areas of research is that unusual. We have like focused grants on things like cancer research. We have focused grants on things like AI. We have focused grants on things like cancer survivorship, cannabis usage. There's so many areas where, the research community decides through various processes what are some of the pressing problems of our time and how can we leverage research to try to solve them. So I don't see anything wrong with Canada research chairs that are focused on specific issues. I think it's helpful to start building research communities on specific topics that require our urgent attention.
Are you aware of any peer-reviewed studies that show that diversity initiatives actually harm research quality?
I am not aware of any peer-reviewed studies that demonstrate that. In fact, I know more studies have shown the opposite. And I know you've heard from Dr. Melinda Smith, who was here a few days ago and testified in front of this committee. But she has done incredible work in on this topic and figuring out how we understand the role of diversity in research.
Thank you so much for that. And perhaps you could elaborate a little bit further on some of the benefits of actually establishing targets. Our analysts have given us some of the information as it relates to Canada research chairs, and over time they seem to show that there are various groups that have been underrepresented in terms of research chairs, actually increasing in numbers. Could you speak a little bit to some of those groups?
Sorry for interrupting. Time is up. If I can request Dr. Hassan to please respond to this question by submitting the answers, and we will then circulate to all the members. We will end this panel with Mr. Blanchet Jonka for 2.5 minutes. Please go ahead.
Madame la Présidente, Professeur Saad.
Professor Saad, when Ottawa is talking about inclusive excellence, is this not contradiction in the use of terms? Are we not taking out excellence from its primary definition by relying on this ideological basis?
Please, you are on mute. Yes.
I was going to say, you're absolutely right. The term excellence and inclusion don't belong in the same sentence. Again, some people on this panel have said that there is unequivocal evidence that supports the fact that diverse research or teams leads to better outcomes. It depends, again, how you measure diversity. As I mentioned earlier, if you measure diversity as, for example, interdisciplinarity, then that form of diversity does improve scientific outcomes because you're getting people that have different areas of expertise that are joining together to solve a common problem. But I would challenge anybody on this committee to tell me how whether I am queer or not will help me improve quantum computing. I'm open to hearing that explanation. But until you show me how my sexual orientation affects my understanding of the distribution of prime numbers, I don't think that those metrics affect research excellence, and they should be made null and void.
Professeur Saad, est-ce que l'imposition de critères idéologiques dans...
Imposing ideological criteria in employment and research, could this undermine the image of Canada because it's giving us the idea that we are giving priority?
People who've written to me who thought, hey, should I come to Canada? I've read your stuff, Professor Saad. I've read your material. Is it as bad as people say that it is? I say, look, there are wonderful things in Canada. There are amazing researchers in Canada. But yes, we are an ultra woke country. We do suffer from stage 4 suicidal empathy. And if you are white, if you are heterosexual, if you are Christian, well, good luck. because you're going to be behind the 8 ball. Those are not words that I should ever be uttering. Anybody should be able to participate in the democratic pursuit of science.
See.
Thank you. And with that, I would like to thank all the 4 witnesses. Sorry for some technical issues.
I have a quick question for you. We've obtained a report from FinTrack that shows that these machines are the number.
All right, gang. I've got a few minutes of all of the, well, not all, many of the cabinet ministers and backbenchers from the Liberal Party making comments on, I just about said the other Randy. His name is Gary. He's a tiger. We're going to watch this, and then I'm going to try to dig up some information on the most recent thing about the ostriches in BC. I don't like watching that one because, like, the politics frustrates me. It makes me angry or whatever. Those ostriches, though, man, they're dumb birds, man. They don't even know. Like, and they're not sick. And there's hundreds of them. I mean, anyways, that one actually chokes me up just thinking about it. What the fuck are you doing that for? Why would you kill all those birds if they're healthy? Like, it makes no sense. We live in a tyrant time.
Number one way that fraudsters are getting money from Canadians. Your government has no regulations specific to these machines. Why is that?
Which machine? Just so that
cryptocurrency ATMs.
Listen, we're looking very much at all the matters that would strengthen our laws in Canada and our regulation. You know, we've been bringing to the G7 even a whole stream of work around financial crimes, making sure that we tighten all the rules around money laundering, making sure that we work more together as G7, because, you know, a lot of these things are transnational. They've been used to sometimes avoid laws and regulations. So I can tell you this is something we're looking at very carefully, very seriously as well. And it's not just Canada, but I would say it's a really G7 initiative. So we're in lockstep with our colleagues because that's one of the things that we need to look at. Obviously, domestically, your question is appropriate, yes, but also in the international context, how can we learn from each other, implement best practices, coordinate with liaison officers, because we know that those who would be trying to circumvent the rules are not just doing that in Canada, but they're usually organized around other countries as well. So that's what we're doing for now.
You mentioned the G7 countries. Other countries have banned these machines. Why is the government not taking?
Listen, like I said, we're looking at that, learning from each other, because it's not one item you need to look at, but the whole ecosystem. But what I can assure is that that's a very active discussion within the G7 where we're looking at that, because we want to be coordinated, and we certainly want to make sure that there's no loopholes that people would use to avoid regulations among our countries. Merci. Merci tout le monde.
Do you think that Minister of Public Safety can keep his role?
Look, I'm willing to work with my colleague to make sure that we execute on the campaign commitment when it comes to the gun buyback. Look, I'm going to always ensure that the Prime Minister has the authority to determine who's in which role. But my experience with Minister Ananda Sangri is that he is a professional who cares deeply about the country, and I value his partnership. I'm late for my meeting.
No, if he can't be banned, you can try and push me in the back end. Minister, keep his job.
Gary Ananda Sangri is an incredibly committed public servant. He's carrying some very big files, and one that was announced yesterday. He's been answering all the questions. Mr. Ananda Sangri is doing a good job.
Should the Public Safety Minister stay in his role?
Look, I have confidence in the Public Safety Minister and the programs that we're rolling out. This is what Canadians asked us to do. They voted for this, and we need to get the programs out.
So should he stay in his role?
I have full confidence in him, and he should be doing what the Prime Minister asked him to do, is to roll out this program, and that's exactly what he's doing. The announcement yesterday was this, and I think Canadians expect us to do it. But thank you so much.
Did you listen to the leaked audio yourself?
What do you make of it?
You had lots of more.
Watch this tub of shit. He is a dirtbag, man. Whew. Man, he drives me nuts.
I was going to ask him questions yesterday, and I thought he answered them.
Jab at the Hut.
Do you think he was to be disloyal about it?
No, I think Gary's incredibly loyal. I think he's doing a great job. He believes in the program, so do I, which is why I was standing with him yesterday.
But how can you say he believes in the program? He didn't seem to defend it in that recording.
You've heard him defend it. I've heard him defend it. I've talked to him privately. He believes in the program. I don't know what more I can say.
Polytechnic survivors says that it casts doubt on the government's seriousness about this program.
Well, the fact that we're moving ahead with it, I would suggest, leads to a different conclusion, and that's why we are doing it. So, I mean, it's an important program. Gary is firmly committed to it, as are we. So, I'm not sure much more I could say about it.
Just on the audio that they're moving ahead because it was important to voters in Quebec.
I heard the audio and I've heard Gary's explanation, and I'm satisfied with his explanation. So.
Do you think it's going to come up in caucus?
Ontario Liberal leadership choosing process. What do you think the Ontario Party needs at this point in time?
Well, I mean, I think that we have a lot of issues that people are very concerned about in Ontario. Whether that's the economy and affordability, whether that's housing, whether that's crime, a number of issues. And I think Ontario Liberals are looking for a leader who can bring forward ideas to address those problems. I don't think those issues are being properly addressed by the current premier.
Yeah.
And
I've seen your name in the mix of potential aspirants for the job. Where can I get you to respond to that?
I'll just say that I'm considering it. I've been approached by a number of people, and I'm considering it.
Do you think the party needs to? Everybody says move a little more left, a little more right. Is there some change required by the party's approach?
I think I'll reserve comment on that. Sure. I think I need to. I want to listen to what people have to say before I comment on that.
Okay. Well, good luck.
The
Thank you very much.
public safety minister's leaked audio. What damage do you think that's caused?
Look, I think these are questions for the public safety minister. I'm focused on, for me, what's important is addressing the concerns that people have about crime and safety in our community. And
the Ontario Liberal leadership?
What I said just previously was that I've been approached by a number of people and encouraged to run, and I'm considering it.
Okay.
Thank you.
This week, as a Palestinian member of Parliament, yes. It must have been a pretty significant day to see what the Prime Minister said at the UN today. Can you maybe just reflect on that?
Absolutely. Generations of Canadians have fought for our country to get to where it is right now. This is historic, but it's clear that more is needed. We're watching the situation on the ground and what I would describe as a genocide, and I know that many others would as well. And we need to see more concrete action. Thank you so much.
And what did you think when the Prime Minister, I assume you watched the speech?
Of course I did.
Yeah, so what did you think? Did he get the right tone? Anything that more he might have wanted to say?
I'm proud, and I'm cognizant of the fact that this is generations and generations worth of work. I'm also mindful of the fact that undermining that would be undermining the people who fought for this very moment.
How do you think it's going to be received?
All right, gang, we've got some of the ostrich farms. It's crazy. Like here, I'm going to try to show you what comes up on my YouTube. Let's see if I can figure out how to do this. I think I can. So yeah, if you look at the story, it's all for like I just put in BC Ostrich Farm Live, right? So we've got the CBC. So they're going to tell the story on behalf of the government, not the birds, not the farmers, not the citizens, not the indigenous people that are trying to protect the birds. They're going to tell some other foolish bullshit story. And so there's CTV, there's Global, there's even worse, the Canadian Free Press, which is bullshit. And then a whole bunch of stories by CTV and CBC, and none of them are going to give it to you straight. There's one here, and I'm hoping that it will
stop the culling
be
of her
close.
flock of nearly 400 ostriches, a move the feds say is necessary to stop the spread of avian flu. Roger Collins joins us now with that.
The birds are healthy, right? And they have been for a long period of time. They're just testing to see how far they can push us, like they did with the pandemic. There's so many things. Again, it gets me frustrated, but they're picking on birds to do this? Make a point with something else. Christ on a bike.
That story. Rogers, what can you tell us?
Manisa, this story has been in the headlines for months, but today it reached a head. Earlier this week, officials honed in on the farm, intent on carrying out the cull. I tried to speak with the woman in charge of these birds and hear her side of the story, but in the middle of our interview, she was arrested. Take a listen.
Do you think the authorities on the ground there are going to listen, or do you think they're going to move in terms of action to you?
We're getting arrested right now.
Everything okay, Katie?
We're getting arrested right now. I gotta go.
It's okay, pretty bird. You're okay. You're gonna be okay. You're gonna be okay, Mama. Yeah.
You're not obliged to say anything, but anything would be maybe proven in evidence. You understand?
During our interview with Katie Pasitny, the online face of the Universal Ostrich Farm, she was abruptly taken into custody as federal officials moved in to enforce a controversial cull order. Here is what she said just prior to her arrest.
We are requesting very much so for the collaboration of Canadian Food Inspection Agency that they do recognize that these animals have never been tested and that this all could just stop by just testing these animals and restoring that faith and trust in between the organization and Canadian citizens.
Since Monday, there's been a tense scene outside the farm in British Columbia.
There was a lot of tension today at a farm in the remote Kootenay community of Edgewood.
Teams of RCMP, including a critical response unit, are at the farm in Edgewood now as part of a convoy of police.
For months, Pasitny has been fighting to save nearly 400 ostriches from being killed after an outbreak of avian flu last December. Some birds died, but most survived. She maintains the flock has recovered and the government has allowed for proper testing.
The Federal Court of Appeal has dismissed our latest request for a stay. Justice Heckman wrote that Universal Ostrich Farm had been given a full and meaningful opportunity to challenge the cull order. But this is simply not true. Every hearing so far has been forced under 10-day deadlines, with no chance for full scientific evidence to be considered.
Since yesterday, dozens of her supporters have been having a standoff as RCMP and Canadian Food Inspection Agency teams arrived to carry out the cull. However, this story goes far beyond the remote community of Edgewood. It's drawn national attention, intense online commentary, and even a statement from the U.S. Secretary of Health, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who believes the birds hold valuable scientific interest.
They then order a cull, a slaughter of all of the ostriches, because that's the only way they can prevent the spread. Even though these are non-migratory birds, they don't even fly, for those of you who don't know, on an isolated farm that's not open to the general public in British Columbia.
But public health experts say avian flu is highly contagious and that Canada's mass culling orders are based on decades of research, not pseudoscience.
It's a free-range farm, meaning that those beautiful ostriches are not protected. So as a result of that, if there are migratory birds coming in, they can have close contact with those ostriches, and vice versa if there is an infection happening in that flock.
Avian flu and its spread has, in the past, had devastating effects on BC's poultry industry. In 2004, 19 million birds had to be culled as a result of its spread.
Every action that we can take to minimize risk of that being spread to commercial poultry, to chicken and turkeys is being taken. The province ordered birds indoors. Recently, we moved to our highest level of biosecurity called red biosecurity level.
As officials move forward with the cull, the flock of nearly 400 ostriches remains at the center of a growing storm, a fight over science, policy, and compassion that's now playing out in the national spotlight. Currently, there are droves of supporters on the ground at the farm, live streaming the scene, and officials are unloading hay bales so they can corral these ostriches and carry out this cull.
All right, gang. Sorry to put that up at the end. I'm just hoping that the birds are there tomorrow. Like, that cracks me up more than it would if there was 400 people in there. I swear to God it does. I don't know what's wrong with me, but something is. I find that shit very upsetting. I'm not crying, but man, I'm probably going to tomorrow when I find out what the real deal is. Stuff drives me crazy. Anyhow, thank you all so much for watching. My name is Aaron, Canadian Looney. We're trying to hit 50,000 subscribers by Christmas. I know that's a big task, but I'm going to be working really hard to do it. Anyhow, thank you all so much for tuning in. That was really interesting with God Sod. If you'd like to learn anything more about God Sod, you've got to look for them. They're not just going to show it to you. You need to type and find God Sod, because if not, they're not just going to be like, hey, check out this guy. And the reasons, I can't even say them here. I can't talk about like the NWO. I can't talk about some forum that is about economics in the world, Santa Claus and his bunch, and the corruption with Carney and Brookfield. It's all connected. You can't say any of it, or they just won't show it unless people find it or they're subscribed. Another reason to like, share, subscribe. That's it, gang. Thank you very much for hanging out. We're just wrapping up. Have a good night. We're back tomorrow with question period. Thursday, we're at our regular time. We'll catch you there. That's it.